In exactly 24 hours, one man's name will be spoken aloud inside a guarded chamber in Tehran. The moment that name leaves the room, the moment it appears on a single screen, a single wire service, a single encrypted government transmission, Israeli, targeting computers that have been running continuously for 11 days, will lock onto that name and begin building a kill package around the human being attached to it. This is not speculation. This is not a threat made in the heat of war. 3 weeks ago, standing before the Israeli Knesset with the cameras of 40 international news organizations recording every word, the Israeli Prime Minister looked directly into those cameras and said the following: "Any individual who accepts appointment as supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran will be accepting a death sentence. Israel will not allow the reconstruction of the command authority that launched 23 waves of missiles at Israeli cities. We will find him, and we will reach him." Those words were broadcast on Al Jazeera within minutes. Tehran heard them, the Assembly of Experts heard them, and every man in Iran whose name has been mentioned as a possible successor heard them very clearly. The 24-hour countdown to the most dangerous leadership announcement in the history of the Islamic Republic began this morning. And nobody, not in Tehran, not in Washington, not in Jerusalem, knows how it ends. The crisis that created this vacancy had been building for 47 days of the most intensive aerial bombardment campaign conducted against any nation since the Second World War. Israeli F-35I Adir stealth fighters, B-2 Spirit bombers operating under American authorization, and a Mossad direct action campaign running simultaneously had systematically dismantled the Iranian military command structure from the top down. The IRGC Aerospace Force commander was killed in the third week when a Rampage missile struck his convoy on a road outside Isfahan that Mossad had identified through a human intelligence source embedded in the commander's personal security detail. The head of the Quds force died in week 4 when an Israeli airstrike collapsed. The underground command bunker in western Tehran, where he had been directing proxy operations across the region. The Minister of Defense was evacuated to an undisclosed location after surviving 2 assassination attempts and has not made a confirmed public appearance in 19 days. And the supreme leader himself, the man whose religious and political authority had held the Islamic Republic together for DECADES, died of cardiac arrest at 0340 hours 11 days ago in circumstances that Iranian state media described as natural causes and that 3 Western intelligence agencies assessed as almost certainly related to the extreme stress of watching his country's military capability dismantled piece by piece over 47 days. The Islamic Republic of Iran was now a nation of 88 million people, the world's 4th largest proven oil reserves, and a functioning nuclear knowledge base, with no one at the top of its command structure. The Assembly of Experts had been in emergency session for 11 days attempting to resolve that problem. In 24 hours, they would announce their solution. The deliberations inside the Assembly of Experts had been unlike anything in the institution's history. Normally, the selection of a supreme leader is a deliberate theological and political process that unfolds over days or weeks of consultation, prayer, and consensus building among the 88 religious scholars who comprise the Assembly. This process was none of those things. It was a negotiation conducted under the constant awareness that Israeli surveillance drones were circling above Tehran at 65,000 feet, that Mossad had penetrated Iranian government communications to a degree that remained unclear but was certainly significant, and that any man who put his name forward as a candidate was doing something that required extraordinary personal courage, or extraordinary political ambition, or both. 3 names had emerged from the 11 days of deliberation. The first was a 71-year-old Grand Ayatollah from Qom whose theological credentials were impeccable, but who had no military or security background and who had spent the previous 47 days in a religious seminary 140 kilometers from Tehran which made him either admirably unworldly or dangerously unprepared for the role. The second was a 58-year-old mid-ranking cleric with strong IRGC connections, who had been the deputy head of the Supreme National Security Council, a man with the security relationships to actually govern in wartime, but whose relatively junior theological rank had created significant resistance among the senior clerics in the assembly. The third was a name that surprised everyone who heard it, a 64-year-old former nuclear negotiator and diplomat whose decade of experience dealing with Western powers gave him a credibility in international contexts that neither of the other candidates possessed, and whose first public statement upon being nominated had been a carefully worded suggestion that the Islamic Republic might be willing to discuss a new framework for its nuclear program. That statement had made him simultaneously the most diplomatically interesting candidate and, according to Israeli military intelligence assessments shared with the American NSC, the most likely target. In Tel Aviv, the Mossad operations room had been running continuously for 11 days in preparation for this moment. 8 separate intelligence collection operations were feeding data into the target development process, signals intercepts from assembly of experts communications, human intelligence from sources inside the Iranian government bureaucracy, satellite imagery of the residential and official locations associated with each of the 3 candidates, pattern of life analysis tracking the movements of each man's personal security detail, and electronic surveillance of the encrypted phones used by senior IRGC commanders, who would be responsible for protecting whoever was selected. The kill package for each candidate was complete. Target folders with the thickness of a novel set in encrypted storage, containing every piece of information required to locate, track, and eliminate each man within hours of his public announcement. The question of whether to use them was not a Mossad decision. It was a political decision, and in the Israeli cabinet, that decision had already been made by a vote of 12-4. If the new supreme leader's first public statements did not include an immediate, verifiable, unconditional halt to all Iranian military activity and a commitment to nuclear disarmament negotiations, the operation would proceed within 72 hours of the announcement. Washington was simultaneously running its own operation against the same 24-hour clock, but with a completely different objective. The CIA's back channel to Tehran, the same Swiss intermediary who had been carrying messages since the secret ceasefire contact 3 weeks earlier, was now being used to transmit a direct American message to the assembly of experts through every conduit available. The message had 3 parts. First, the United States would guarantee a 30-day pause in all military operations if he knew. Supreme Leader's inaugural statement included a commitment to nuclear talks. Second, American diplomatic pressure on Israel to refrain from any action against the new leader would be substantial, but could not be guaranteed if the leader's first actions included any reconstitution of Iranian military offensive capability. Third, and this was a part of the message that the CIA director had argued most strongly for including, the United States had specific intelligence suggesting that Mossad operations targeting all 3 candidates were in advanced preparation, and that the window between announcement and Israeli action was likely measured in hours rather than days. This was not a threat. It was information. What Tehran did with it was Tehran's decision. The announcement came at 1400 hours local time on the 24th day. Iranian state television cut to a live feed from the Assembly of Experts chamber. The Secretary of the Assembly read a brief statement confirming that the body had reached a consensus decision in accordance with the Constitution of the Islamic Republic. And then he spoke the name, the former nuclear negotiator, the diplomat, the man whose first nomination statement had suggested willingness to discuss a new nuclear framework. He was now the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. His acceptance speech lasted 14 minutes and was being translated simultaneously in 6 languages and intelligence agencies across the world. The critical sentence came at the 11-minute mark. The Islamic Republic, he said, was prepared to engage in direct negotiations with all parties to reach a comprehensive agreement that preserved Iranian sovereignty while addressing legitimate international concerns about its nuclear and military programs. In the Mossad operations room in Tel Aviv, the duty officer picked up the phone to the Prime Minister's military secretary. In the CIA back channel in Geneva, the Swiss intermediary was already drafting the American response. In Washington, the National Security Advisor walked into the Oval Office and told the president that the next 72 hours would determine whether the war ended or became something the world had not seen since 1945. The countdown that had begun 24 hours ago had not ended. It had simply become a different kind of countdown, one measured not in the hours until a name was announced, but in the hours until everyone with the power to decide what happened next made the choice that would define the rest of the century.